Welcome to the Church and State Auxiliary, a podcast where we review people, their beliefs, and how it affects their politics. The views and opinions expressed in this podcast are solely those of the host and not a reflection of any company or organization or group. We invite you to listen, to ask questions, and follow along. All right, welcome back to the fifth episode of the Church and State Auxiliary. We are going to continue our discussion on the separation of church and state, which, surprise, surprise, has kind of, I won't say taken a different road than I initially intended, but as always, when discussing a topic, there's many different angles and sides you need to look at the problem from. So as we discussed in episode 3 and episode 4, it was the need to find the common ground, especially in episode 4. It was about, we use the example of, you go to the airlines and there's an issue at in the travel process, I'll say, and it unifies the body of people, and they want what's right to them or what they feel is fair. And it was essentially what we were talking about is maybe we as a nation aren't that far separated from each other. It's just finding a common ground. Now, we got a comment, though, that talked about the claim was that they weren't willing to compromise with one side or the other because of various beliefs. And I want to reiterate, I'd never want anyone, especially Christians, we do not need to compromise our beliefs or our faith. We don't need to compromise those values. A lot of the encouragement that I want to give in this, in order to facilitate change in our nation, we have to start a conversation. If we resort to just offense, and then if I get offended, then I resort to name calling or arguing or some type of uncivil conversation, then that leads to a fight, which both sides at that point are unyielding in their conversation, and they won't learn really from each other, and they aren't interested of learning from each side. And then that inevitably, as that continues, as we have seen resulting in our society, political violence, right?
Yeah, I think you've articulated that. I mean, that's a very real, logical end path of not having a good conversation is the only way you can then resolve your conflict is through uh, just forcing the other person to do what you want them to do. And uh, I don't think we want to. I don't think we want to be there
No.
as a society and as a culture. And going back, I mean, you were saying, we were advocating finding a common ground, you know, and it's interesting how quickly finding the common ground morphs from what we said, find a common ground to have a conversation with someone, to, oh, if you're having a conversation with someone, you must be compromising your values.
Right.
And that wasn't what we said at all.
No.
That's not what we insinuated, and hopefully it didn't come across that way. So,
But it is scary. I like your point. It is really scary that we have become a society in which if I'm willing to have a conversation with you or have a discussion about a topic, that act alone is viewed as some type of compromise, right?
exactly.
And that, that really is unheard of, I think. I remember when you could have differing opinions and at least still have a conversation.
Right, because ultimately, conversations, as we've talked about, conversations are essential to begin to change someone else's
Right.
opinion. Um, the last thing that we're advocating is that you compromise on your moral convictions as a Christian. So we're not asking you to compromise on that. What we're asking you to do is to look at your beliefs, to hold those beliefs, and then to be able to communicate those beliefs to somebody else, have that conversation with them.
Yes.
And recently heard a statistic the other day that said, if you're really close friends with someone, and it's an interesting statistic, if you're a good friends with someone, they will believe about 80% of what you say. In other words, even close
Even
friends
close friends, you
think
don't believe everything.
they think you're lying to them, 2 out of 10 times.
You wonder how marriages work.
Exactly. But if you are strangers with someone, if you're at odds, I would say it's even less, but if you're strangers and don't know each other, then that percentage drops to 20%. They only believe two out of every 10 things that you tell them if you're strangers. So your ability, and I would say that if you're enemies with someone, that
That drops
percentage,
to
I
0.
would say that it's going to drop, 10 to 0, somewhere in there. So if we ever hope to have a dialogue where we are able to talk to people and convince them to see things our way, we've got to do more than be enemies. We've got to do more than be strangers. We've actually got to have a conversation with these people so that they actually believe half of what we say anyway.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so a lot of it then becomes, and you watch I compare having those type of conversations as a chess game, right? So if I want to have that type of dialogue with someone where I'm trying to make them see my side, right? I want them to understand the reason why I believe what I believe and the morals that I hold near and dear. As any great chess player would do, they know what the other side, their opponent, is going to say and do, right? So in
Yes.
chess, you have many different opening strategies, and as you play the game, different strategies come into effect. And what you do is you review footage of your opponent and understand what strategies they uh, will go to, right, go towards, and not. So in our conversation as a Christian, if I'm talking to a non-religious, I'll say non-religious, or I guess it could be a religious person, but someone who doesn't share my same fundamental moral code and beliefs, I need to know, in order to better articulate my point to them, I gotta know what they're going to say. I need to know their arguments, and I think what keeps people from doing that, number one, is it's a lot of work. Right? I mean, it requires a vast amount of reading and understanding what the dialogue of the conversation will be.
Absolutely. I think we were talking earlier about this. And so, way back in my younger years, I would listen to the public broadcasting stations and NPR and those kinds of things. And I would, as I was listening to them, I would get upset, and I would say, I don't agree with that. And I'd reach over and I would flip the station and go to listen to something else. But I found that when I stopped for a moment and analyzed what I was doing, the anger that I felt wasn't from what they were saying as much as what they that I could not
You couldn't
articulate
articulate a
a
response.
response to it. And I found myself floundering, and I found that the source of my irritation was more at myself for not understanding their position and not being able to counter that position. And so I felt helpless. I felt weak. I felt compromised in some way because I felt very vulnerable. And so
Right,
I would get angry and then I would just turn it off.
right.
And
And I think the fear comes from the fact that I know, speaking for myself, own experience, is if I don't know how to defend my viewpoint, I am vulnerable. And the other thing that scares me is it opens up the opportunity that I might have to change. Right.
yes,
If I don't have a good argument, then I can't defend where I'm standing. And in basically, by that logical conclusion, I might need to reevaluate my own beliefs and my things. Now, let me say this: even if you can't defend exactly what you believe today, does not mean that you need to go change, but you need to grow and mature and develop.
yeah, and I
And
think
you're
that's what you're going
yeah,
back to what you said earlier. Just because you don't understand something doesn't mean you need to blindly accept something else. But that's also what we're not asking the other side to do either.
correct,
We're not asking the other side to just listen to our point of view and accept it.
correct.
We should be able to articulate the depths and the intricacies of what we're doing. over something else. Uh, and we should be able to bring that in to our conversation with them.
Yes.
That's critical. I think that's just critical
Yes.
understanding of what we're doing.
Thanks for listening to the Church and State Auxiliary. We hope you enjoyed the content in this podcast. If you did, give us a like, a follow, or subscribe. If you have questions, leave comments down below. Thanks again for listening.